Hello YouTube. Today we're talking about individualism and the importance it has in real life and in the fitness realm, because they're both connected, and you will see that to me building a strong individualistic drive is the most important thing you can do in both cases, because it's going to carry you forward. And I'm going to debunk some ideas that some people have in their heads that prevent them from reaching their full potential because they refuse to be individualistic. So I'm going to logically try to explain to you why it makes total sense to be so, and on top of that, why all of the preconceived ideas about people who are individualistic, about individualistic societies, are wrong. So, first off, the importance of individuality. What is individuality? Individuality is the development of the self. The self is you. That should be a given, but it truly isn't in the modern age, because we have slowly evolved from something that is purely biological, where people are just driven by their hormones and by their instincts, to a society where culture has a much stronger impact on the way we live, to the point where sometimes culture overtakes biology, even though in most cases culture is just a byproduct of biology. So, in our modern environment, in the contemporary world, we are sometimes stuck between a rock and a hard place, between following our own instinct that tells us to be selfish and to self-preserve and expand ourselves, and a society that tells us that this is not the way to go, this is not moral, and you should rather work for the good of others. I'm going to prove to you that these two things are actually the same exact thing, and that what most people call being good to others, being charitable, in reality is disguised negativity, and it's only going to make your life worse as well as the life of others. So that is what I'm going to refer to when I talk about individuality. It's the idea that self-betterment and the fulfillment of the needs of the body and the spirit are first and foremost essential for the individual, for human beings in general, and that is something that we should look after. It should always be our number one priority, always, and nothing should ever replace it. Outside of that, you also have the collectivity, and the collectivity is the environment in which you, as a person, exist. It's the people around you, because an individual, when multiplied by 100, make a collective. There are multiple types of collective. I'm mostly going to be talking about communities, societies, and countries in this video. I'm not going to go too deep into each, because this is not really focused on sociology. Rather, I want to discuss philosophy in here to help you improve your life. But you'll see that here and there I'm going to use some concepts that relate to social engineering. So, in my world, and in reality, logically, if you think about it, the collective stems from the individual and not the other way around. If we were to look at it as which one came first, the chicken or the egg, in this case, it's the egg, okay? It's because the connection between the two is not parental in a sense, it is communal. So the group cannot exist without the individuals that make it, but the individuals can exist without the group. You will see, however, that the potential of the individual might not be fully expressed without the group. Whereas for the chicken and egg thing, for the people who are interested in that little mystery or enigma, the reason why you can never say with certainty which came first is because for it to be a chicken, there needs to be a chicken egg, but for the chicken egg to exist, there needs to be a chicken that laid it. In reality, it's splitting hair, it's a discussion about genetics, and when the first species that we refer to as chicken came to life. And so in reality, it also means that for the chicken and egg thing, the egg came first because the parent created an egg that was 0.00001% different in DNA, and that's the first chicken. So the egg came first, but it's not the topic of the video. So, in terms of the semantics I'm going to use, I already said individuality, collective, etc. You're also going to hear me talk about individualism and collectivism. These are not the same thing. These are ideologies, and you will see that individuality is not individualism and collectivity is not collectivism. I'm going to explain it right now. In terms of individualism, a lot of people will tell you the West is made up of countries which promote individualism. The idea that the person comes first, not the group. And it also carries a certain amount of negative connotations, such as selfishness. The idea that in countries such as America, people look after themselves to the point where they sometimes become cruel, and it gave birth to an entire system of ruthless capitalism where people go way beyond the simple preservation of the self, and the expansion of the self, la soif de pouvoir, is going rampant to the point that they then start to encroach on other people's ability to preserve themselves. That is individualism, okay? So I'm not going to use that term that much because in reality, one, it doesn't happen as often as people say, it is widely overblown, and two, it's a different discussion. It's the discussion about economy and about things that are not really philosophical. So if you're interested, maybe I'll make another video about it, but it's not the topic of this one. Collectivism is the exact opposite, of course. It is the idea that the group takes over the individual, and that for the best of the group, you need to subjugate the individual. And a lot of people say, oh, the East is based on collectivism. That also is not really the case, because if you look at Asian countries, for example, which are often used as the primal examples of collectivism in the world, they truly are not, at least not based on our definition. Meaning that for it to exist, there needs to be strong individualism in the first place, because the excellence of the one permits the excellence of the group. That exists in every Asian country. If you've been there, the standards are extremely high, and personal responsibility is also extremely high. That is, and I'll get back to that, good collectivism, and in reality, it is where human beings evolved to. Now, there's also evil collectivism, where a small portion of individuals force a group, the majority, to abide to certain rules, and they convince the group in a sense that this is for their own good, that they submit for the good of the group, but you quickly realize that the only people who benefit from that are the individuals on top. You can just call that communism. This is the exact appellation for this type of system, and it works perfectly well because it is extremely easy to shame people into giving up their individuality if you convince them that in the long run it's going to benefit them, which in reality shows that the entire system is highly hypocritical, because if it's supposed to benefit the group, the only way to really get people to do that is to convince them that once the group benefits, the individual benefits. And on top of that, when that doesn't work, you use fear or coercion, which shows that the system is bound to fail. And the system is a Ponzi scheme in reality that benefits 0.001% of the population, the apparatchiks that control everything. That's political. Likewise, it's neither philosophical nor related to lifting. But I say that to make you understand that even though you might think that your primal instincts will help you preserve your individualism, it truly isn't the case. You can easily be poisoned into giving up your individuality, and once that is given up, you are doomed, because once the self is gone, everything is gone. If you cannot control and protect this, you can't control your private property, you can't control your family, because they don't exist. They're connected to the self. If the self is stolen, everything you think you own is stolen. You own nothing now. Very important, because it relates to lifting, as you will see very soon. So that's the two terms that I'm not going to use that much, because as I said, they're hors sujet. After that, how it applies to YouTube fitness. I just spoke for, I think, 5 or 10 minutes about something that looks to be completely out of topic. But in reality, it truly isn't, because YouTube fitness is a perfect example of collectivism going rampant and the sacralization of the individual that in reality is going to suppress the collective. So the way it works, I'm going to just stop for 1 second. My cat is clearly a Soviet agent. She didn't like me bad-mouthing communism, so she was making noise. She was taken care of. She's off to the gulags now. Okay, so how it applies to YouTube fitness? Well, YouTube fitness, if you think about it, what is YouTube fitness in reality? YouTube fitness is a bunch of guys like me who make videos watched by a bunch of people. So there's already a distinction between me, who I define clearly as an individual through my channel, and you who are really just a name lost in the mass. So by default, you are the collective and I am the individual. This is the state of affair here. And it could be good, meaning that this is not necessarily a bad thing, but you will see that in reality, it creates a system of oppression that completely suppresses your individuality, and that relates to real life. So, to go back to what I said previously, when I first introduced the topic, and I told you that in reality, individuality and the collective are connected, and individualism and collectivism are connected. How so? Well, if you look, as I said, at collectivism, collective systems that function, what are they based on? They're based on the strength of the individual. And every single strong individual paired together with another one creates a pair, then 3 people, 4 people, etc. And when the group is finally complete, it is a strong, cohesive group. That is extremely important. So in reality, as I said, you cannot get collectivism without individualism. It's not possible. So the entire idea that you get a strong group when the members of the group give up their self is a lie. If they give up their self, you get a group of sheep, you get a group of slaves. You certainly don't get a group that is strong or independent. Where that starts making sense is that a big portion of YouTube fitness is the giving up of the identity. And I will explain that in details because I'm preparing a video about YouTube fitness and YouTubers in general, where I'm going to talk about fanboys, I'm going to talk about the parasocial relationship that you might not know but is damaging your mental health and your ability to progress and be whole as a person. Here in this video, I'm mostly going to talk about the reason why you lose your individuality on YouTube fitness. First off, as I said, you're just a name in the mass, and especially on big channels, you don't really exist. The guy who makes the videos doesn't read your comments. You might have a few interactions here and there with other people, but you'll never talk to these people again because there's just too many people in the collective. That is a big issue because in reality, again, collectives are not hundreds of thousands of people. They're made up of small communities. A country is not a nation united with people who share the same ideals. That is the dream, of course, but there's not a single example on earth of people who actually work like this without force or without being coerced by tyranny. In reality, what happens is that if you have strong pockets of collectivism added as a whole, they make a good country. But in reality, the pockets are small because the extension of your knowledge, in a sense, and your ability to connect to people is limited. It's also the reason why any system that pretends that you have to care for everyone and everything is toxic and is really manipulation. You cannot do that as a human. We are programmed to care about the people close to us. People who pretend to care about everyone are hypocrites, and they're doing that because they're trying to be moral, and that's sort of the entire gist of this video. Do not let morality guilt you into giving up your individuality, because without individuality, there can be no morality. Someone who doesn't have its own agency cannot be moral because they're just following orders. For example, let's say there's a cat on the side of the road, it's hurt, and you go to pick it up and you help it. That, in my opinion, is good morality. You have followed your own principles. There is a weak and innocent creature hurt, you're going to save that creature. Now, let's say there is a law in your country with policemen watching everyone, and the law states that if you don't help a pet in distress, you're going to go to jail. You help that cat. Is it still good morality? I argue that no, because you were forced into doing that. It's the same dichotomy between charity and welfare. Charity comes from the self. You decide, I want to give because I think this is good. And the other one is the government taking money from your pocket and putting that into the pocket of someone else, taking also the, I was going to say the benefit, yes, the benefit because they take a portion of it, but also taking the responsibility for it, so they get the praises for giving the welfare, even though it's your money, which really goes to show how toxic that system is also. But most importantly, it's not you doing that out of kindness. You didn't do that because you wanted to, you were coerced, and that is always bad. So, that is what YouTube fitness and what a strong collective can do. But again, as I said, that strong collective force stems from the individual. It always does. And who is the individual in that case? The YouTuber, and that also goes for me. we have a strong sway over our audience. And I have found that the more toxic the channel becomes, the more amoral the channel becomes, the more sway the YouTuber has, to the point where you have a large portion of the audience that is going to just obey what that person says, whatever they say, because what they say goes, and what they say must be moral because they represent the supreme authority that governs the collective. It is something that I've always fought on this channel. I have people on the channel that understand that perfectly, even though they might not have intellectualized the concept, and they actively fight it as well. This is most excellent. I'm going to talk about it more, but never be reverent for anyone. Respect those that you think deserve respect, but never respect someone just because another person does. This is entirely stupid. This is how you enter a cult, or how you get embrigaded into a group that is going to work against your own interest. So that is what YouTube Fitness does. It steals your agency in reality, because you are stuck in a situation where, let's say you're on a big page of someone who idolizes the YouTuber who makes the video. That goes also for my page. And you say something that goes against the word of the person. You are now going to be targeted by the group. So you are now seen as an outsider of the group. But in reality, the only thing you're doing is you're expressing your individuality. And the group, the collective, immediately punishes you for it, because the collective has given up their individuality. There's a portion of jealousy in this. In reality, it's the group that punishes the free person. It's a group of slaves that is going to try and put chains on you as well. And that is, in nature, a behavior that is extremely current. And it's very strong in humans. And so, this is why, in terms of preservation, what you need to do is to continue on that path. Even if you get attacked, it is perfectly fine. Being attacked for your opinion means that you have an opinion. And that is a good sign that you have preserved your individuality. So keep going. Now, why preserve your individuality? What is the point? Well, I've already told you pretty much that in terms of ideology, without individual, there is nothing. But you might be wondering, okay, but explain more. Go further. How come I lose everything when I don't have individuality? Well, it's quite simple, and I can relate that to lifting. Why do you lift? I actually have a series prepared that is going to be called Why We Lift. But why do you lift? Is it for the collective? Is it so that you can lift a fridge for your grandma or for the guy down the street? I don't think so. You lift purely for personal gain. And that is perfectly fine. And it's the reason why also in the soul shaming video I explained to you that society likes to point out lifting as something vain. Same logic. They see something that is self-improvement and that is the pinnacle of the expression of the self, and they don't like it because they don't have that. They gave it up. They gave it up for the safety of the collective. And so they are trying to actively punish those who don't follow the same path. In this case, if we're going back, understand also that, as I said in the previous installment, and by installment I mean before I went to stop my cat from making noise. If you compare individualism and collectivism, as I said, collectivism is to me the stage that humanity reaches when it has perfected individualism. Because if you get enough people who reach their full potential, eventually you start maxing out. And when you're maxed out, you realize that it becomes tougher to work without a group. And maybe then you get married, right? That's the start of collectivism in reality. The family is. You get married, you have kids. You pass down your knowledge to your kids with the hope that they surpass you because they share your values. Now you go and live in a neighborhood with a bunch of other families that have the same values. You are now a pocket. That pocket grows throughout neighborhoods, makes a state that then becomes a country, etc., etc. This has stemmed from you. The first step was you. It was you perfecting yourself. Meaning that if there's never that perfection step, there can be no true collectivism. Because a collective made solely of mediocre individuals is, as I said, not going to work. It's going to just be a system that is going to pull people down and never elevate people. If you are part of a group, ask yourself, what is that group doing for me? If it's not doing anything for you, why are you in the group? Most likely the group needs you more than you need it. So leave. A perfect symbiotic relationship between the individual and the collective exists and is possible, but only if it's coming and stemming from the strong seeking the strong. The weak seeking the weak only creates victimization mindsets and slave morality, which is something you want to avoid at all costs because it is comfortable. The strong seeking the strong means that you're going to be surrounded by people who are not going to take any shit, who are going to tell you when you mess up, who are going to put personal responsibility on a pedestal, and who are going to breed a very, very strong sense of not necessarily discomfort, but of awareness. You're going to have to be aware. You're going to have to be active. On the other hand, the weak, seeking the weak, creates comfort pockets, secure spaces where nothing happens. If something happens that is not liked by the group, they reject it immediately, etc. This is something you want to avoid because, as I said, you can find it reassuring. And let's say you do find it reassuring, it's going to be extremely tough to be extirpated out because anyone from an actual striving, healthy mindset will seek and will rather appear to you as predatorial. And so you're going to have the mindset of a sheep that flees the wolf that is going to try and who is only trying to remove its chains. I'm going a little bit too deep here. But the reason why I say that is because in terms of lifting is exactly that. Lifting is accepting that personal responsibility means if you put in the work to lift, you are going to get great results. If you don't, you won't. It sounds simplistic. Many people still don't get it. I still have many people who wonder why they're not making any progress, and I can tell you that if I could see the way they train, I could point it out and say, hey, it's because you're lazy. This is why you're not making any progress. But, of course, it doesn't appear evident to them because they are lacking individuality. There is no one stricter with himself than the individual who has a strong sense of self, because you cannot escape your own critical judgment. A lot of people manage to, the weak, they constantly extend their critical sense on others because it saves them from critiquing themselves. And the same people, if you critique them, they would fall apart because they just can't take it. If you critique yourself constantly and you're constantly seeking performance, you are going to want to be extremely tough and resistant and resilient to critique because you will understand that it might be either a gratuitous attack or a way for you to better yourself. And on top of that, you won't even need people to critique you because you'll be your worst critique. And these people are dangerous. These people are the ones that drive forward. They're unstoppable forces and they make the best groups. These are the groups that work. And I say all of this to also present the flip side of that, the idea that a perfect or a perfected collective should stifle the individual and that you shouldn't be able to hear the voice of the individual within the group if it's done properly. I explained at the start of the video, that is not what collectivism is. So now that this is said, I've always noticed that the best lifters are individualistic to sometimes a fault, meaning that you get to such a high level of physical development and spiritual advancement that you stop being receptive to new information and you start thinking that you already know everything. That can be a problem, especially if you stop growing. But if you are actually true to yourself and you are keeping yourself accountable, it's never going to happen. Because if you stop progressing, you're going to realize that your mindset needs to be changed and the practices and ideas that you apply in training need to be changed. In reality, the people who are stuck in their way, who don't progress, but who refuse to change, don't have strong individualistic sense. Rather, they have deluded themselves into thinking that they have reached the max. They think they can never learn anymore, and therefore they also reject knowledge coming from others. But I've, as I said, always found also that the more you learn about lifting, the less you need other people. And in reality, with this channel, if you're new or if you're an intermediate, you're going to reach a stage where you're not going to watch as many of my videos because you're going to know most of what I'm going to say. And I want you to know at this moment that it's great. This is a moment of pride for you. It means that you have now a knowledge base and a matrix in your brain sufficient that you don't need to rely on someone else. And that is also the beauty of individuality. Someone stuck in a collective can only exist in the collective. The individual doesn't need the collective. It only enters and creates collectives if it seeks benefits from it Once it stops being beneficial, it leaves because it doesn't need it. And in reality, this is also for the people who wonder, oh, is there a way to destroy toxic collectivism? Yes, there is. Just leave. Just don't engage. Because this group of people exist on off the back of the very few strong persons that are part of it. Once the strong people leave, it's only weak people, and weak people tend to devour their own. They start with the weakest member and then they just go up from there. So that's a life lesson as well. If you want to see a system that you dislike crumble, just leave. If you critique it, in reality, you might just be feeding it more. Unless you have a way to just completely torpedo the entire thing, then yes, do it. But if you don't, the best way is just to not engage. In terms of what this does, what I just described does, in reality, I'm just presenting the idea of a role model. Because strong individuals breed strong individuals, not necessarily through biology, but through sociology. Because we are attracted to this type of people. It's what people call charisma in general. Charisma is individuality. It's not collectivity at all. You don't find a group charismatic. You find the leader of the group charismatic. Does it mean that they are objectively the best member of that group? No. But you know that they have the approval of the group, and that makes them extremely attractive. In terms of power fantasy, especially male power fantasy, that is the driving force. And it's also the reason why, as I said, YouTube fitness is this, but bizarro mode, because you are looking up to a role model that doesn't have a contact with you, but you have the weird idea in your head that you're part of his group. You're not part of his group. I mean, you're a subscriber. I would say, and that's something that I'm trying to preserve, that on this channel, you are part of a group, you're part of a tight-knit community. But let's not kid ourselves. I know some of you on a certain level. I don't know you personally. You could die tomorrow, I wouldn't be the wiser. So it also needs to be said, because regardless of the amount of connection that the YouTuber has with the subscribers, it can never replicate a true connection that would exist within a human physical collective. It is in reality a mockery of that system, and it's the reason why so many people are fanboys. Is because they truly do believe that they belong. They never had a place to belong. They finally get that on YouTube Fitness. And when someone criticizes the group, they become rabid. Because in reality, the group has become their identity. They have replaced individualism by collectivism entirely. As I said before, because they don't understand that strong collectivism stems from strong individualism. And to just wrap the philosophical stuff up, if the two exist at the same time, the one that has the ability to exist in both spaces, in reality is the one that exists in vase communicant, meaning that there is a true connection between the two systems. And that is the system that is built off of individuality, that then created the collectivity. But if the collectivity disconnects itself from the individual, you understand that eventually it's going to die, because what fed it was the individual. And that's how you end up with groups of nut huggers, people who lose their individuality. They all sound the same, they all have the same opinion. Why? Because they fell for the trap. They completely lost sight of the self, and now their self is the self dictated by the group. But who dictates the self of the group? The person who leads that group. And that person might be a complete idiot. Never put your own identity in the hands of someone else. Regardless of who you think you are, regardless of what you think society thinks of you, be yourself. It can never be wrong. It can only be wrong if you let someone else decide it for you. So that's important, because the role model, when applied properly and not when it's not tainted with toxicity, as I explained, gives birth to strong community. You belong in the group because you want to. That is extremely important. I explained that before. The individual is not coerced into the group. He partakes in it because he sees benefit and he sees that he can benefit from it. As some of you might know already, if you listen to my videos about Stoicism, you know that I also believe that rampant individualism that I described a little bit at the start, even though it's a little bit of an overblown cliche in the West, can be, of course, dangerous, because The individual that starts to believe he doesn't need the group will eventually realize that he does. And when he does, it's going to be too late, because just like the collective that just floated away, drifted away, the more individualistic you become, the more you're going to be stuck in your own ways, and the day you reach a top potential and you need the help of others, you might not be able to make it. I say that to balance the tone of this video, because I don't want you to go too deep. I have went too deep in the past, and in reality, just like the collective that stops being a collective, the individual, when disconnected from others, eventually stops being an individual. The individual, as he drifts away on the spectrum of human interactions, starts becoming more of a beast. So you're going to start losing your human values. And on this side, the collective becomes more and more of a group of slaves. And in both cases, the extremes are not good. The animal has excellent freedom, but not much agency at all anymore, because in reality, it returned to a state of nature, and the slave has zero freedom. He has the agency that he thinks he owns, but that the master gives him, and he returned into a state of nature as well, but a different type. So the balance is, in reality, not clean in the middle, but closer to the individualistic side without going overblown. And the last thing, and I'm going to leave you with that, is to wrap it up with the lifting thing, because I realized that I didn't talk much about lifting in this video. Lifting is this, all of what I just described, because it's going to teach you that. In reality, this is the end word, because it's what you really should retain from this video. How to be individualistic. Does it mean eating all of the crackers and not sharing food with people? No. The individual is the person who realizes that hard work applied to the self is the way forward in life, and that the betterment of the self is going to benefit society as a whole. Nothing can benefit society if it doesn't benefit the self and the individual. What is good for the bee is good for the swarm, and vice versa. And lifting teaches you that. For a lot of people who have been born into systems that try to drag them, to forcibly drag them towards collectivism, there is no better immunization, I don't even know if that's a word, immune system, function of the immune system, to make you completely resistant towards those types of attempts than lifting. Because you'll get the result from work that you've done. When you don't put in the work, you don't get the result. So you get a direct feedback from your own action. And it really is the reason why you are going to see and notice that strong and big naturals tend to also have a strong and big self. They are a big person, both physically and spiritually. And that is the reason why you should be lifting. And it's the reason why developing your individuality is also going to result in you lifting more avidly, because they're also connected. If you start losing the self, you're going to start giving up on your training more and more, and it feeds each other, meaning that it's a vicious circle. So always stick to lifting, and you will find that the sense of individuality in you will always remain strong. And as it remains strong, as I said, you become a role model, you become a good addition to any group you want, but most importantly, you also become a force. In a society with a lot of people with a strong sense of individuality, people can strive, people can be happy. You don't need others, but if you want to, you can associate with them. On the flip side, a society that rejects and tries to crush individuality is a system that is going to make people very miserable. And as I said, the reason why you see that in the modern world, where you see so many people who seem to be seeking their own misery and destruction, is because it's comfortable. Lifting is uncomfortable. Being strong is uncomfortable. Being big is uncomfortable. But between the discomfort of the now and the permanent lack of anything of the future, if you refuse the present discomfort, I think the choice is extremely easy to make. And I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.